80 men in shackles were found buried in perfect rows outside of Athens. In a Belgian cave, Neanderthal bones showed clear signs of being eaten by other humans. And at an ancient site in Iran, 2 young men died holding each other in a storage pit, suffocating as their city burned around them. These are disturbing things archaeologists found and wish they hadn't. In 2016, a mass grave was discovered near Athens. Inside were the remains of 80 men still shackled at the wrists. Their bodies were lined up in rows. They hadn't been tossed in carelessly, which immediately stood out. Whoever they were, someone took the time to arrange them in a specific way, which is strange given how they died. The remains date back to around 650 to 625 BCE, a time when Athens was dealing with a lot of political tension. That's right around when a nobleman named Cylon tried to take control of the city. His coup failed, and his supporters were captured. Historical records say they were promised safety after taking shelter in a temple, but that promise was obviously broken, and they were executed. Some researchers think this grave might be where some of those supporters ended up. At Goyet Cave in Belgium, researchers studying Neanderthal remains found human bones that clearly showed signs they'd been eaten by other Neanderthals. The bones, which are about 40,000 years old, had been deliberately cut and cracked. Some had been broken open to remove marrow, others showed burn marks. They were cooked. Tool marks match the same kinds found on animal bones at the site. The bones belong to at least 5 Neanderthals, including both adults and teenagers. The remains were mixed in with bones of horses and reindeer, all processed in the same way. Scientists also found that some Neanderthal bones had been reused as tools. This isn't the only site in Europe with evidence like this, but it's one of the clearest. We don't know the exact reason behind it. It could have been a simple case of, well, we got no other choice, we'll just have to eat each other. Their hunts were failing, and who knows. Could it also have been some sort of ritual though? There is a slight chance of that as well, but there's no definitive answer, and there may never be. Back in 1973, archaeologists were digging at an ancient site in Iran called Hasanlu. The site had been violently destroyed around 800 BCE, and in the middle of all the rubble, they found 2 skeletons lying side by side in what looked like a storage bin. One of them had an arm reaching out, touching the other's face. Their heads were close together, and they were clearly holding each other when they died. First, people assumed, well, this was a man and a woman. That's how the site got the nickname the Hasanlu Lovers, but it was later found they were probably both male. Nobody knows exactly what their relationship was, but it's clear they meant something to each other. They hadn't just been tossed into the same place. It looks like they crawled in the bin to hide when the city was being attacked. There's no sign of violent injuries on the skeletons, which means they likely suffocated. In 2008, archaeologists were digging near York in the UK when they found a human skull in a waterlogged pit. Then they looked inside and realized that the brain was still in there. Brains break down pretty fast after death, so thousands of years later, it should have been long gone, but this one had somehow stuck around for over 2,600 years. They think the person was hanged and then decapitated. The head was tossed into the pit, which was full of wet, clay-rich soil. This created an airtight environment, and with no oxygen, the brain didn't rot, at least not fully. I mean, it shrunk and it got a little yellowish, but it kept its basic shape. It's the oldest intact brain ever found in Britain, and it's still one of the best preserved ancient brains in the world. Scientists tested it and found that certain proteins had clumped together in a way that may have also helped preserve it. It's a weird mix of conditions that just lined up perfectly. Most of the body was gone, so the brain by itself became this bizarre little time capsule. It's rare enough to find human remains this old, but a brain? No one expects to dig that up. In 2018, construction workers in Alexandria, Egypt, came across a massive black granite sarcophagus buried underground. The thing was huge, over 8 feet long, sealed shut. It had been untouched for over 2,000 years. At the time, people online were joking about how opening it would unleash a curse or a plague upon the world, but the team of archaeologists, well, they just went ahead and cracked it open anyway. Well, what they found wasn't supernatural, but it was disgusting. Inside were 3 skeletons floating in this pool of reddish liquid. It was sewage water that had leaked in over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years. As you can imagine, the smell was almost unbearable. The bones were badly decayed and waterlogged. There were no inscriptions or markings to say who these people were, which is odd. A sarcophagus that size usually belonged to someone important, but they were able to determine that the remains were of 2 men and 1 woman. Even though there was no curse, nobody was in a rush to drink the red water, despite someone actually starting a petition online to do just that. Yeah, after news broke about the find and the nasty red sewage water inside, some people online, half joking, possibly half serious, started calling it mummy juice, and someone created a change.org petition titled something like, "Let the people drink the red liquid from the cursed dark sarcophagus so we can assume its powers." It picked up thousands of signatures in just a few days. In 2009, workers in Dorset, England were digging for a road project when they hit a pit filled with bones. It looked to them just like a bunch of old skeletons, which was true, but once archaeologists got in, they found that none of these bodies had heads. They found 51 decapitated skeletons, all adult men, and nearby there was a separate pile of skulls. The bodies had been laid out pretty neatly, and they'd all been cut clean at the neck. This was not the site of a battle, it was an execution site. DNA and isotope testing confirmed these men weren't from around there. They were Scandinavian, so Vikings, probably captured during a raid. Their teeth showed they grew up in colder climates, probably Norway or Sweden. The carbon dating placed the event sometime between 910 and 1030, which lines up. There were a lot of Vikings in England at the time. And by that I mean years, not time of day. This is one of the most brutal Viking-era mass graves ever found in the UK. In 2015, archaeologists discovered a tomb near the ancient city of Amphipolis in northern Greece. The tomb was enormous and was decorated with intricate mosaics and sculptures, but the site didn't match any known historical records of famous burials. The main chamber was built with massive stone blocks, and inside they found remains of a lot of people. Some of the bones had battle wounds. The art was strange though. It was kind of this mix of Greek mythology with elaborate floral patterns and then images of sphinxes. The tomb dates back to the late 4th century BCE, around the time of Alexander the Great's death. But there's no solid clue as to who this tomb belonged to. Some think it might have been connected to one of Alexander's generals or family, but that's only a theory. The mix of cultural influences make it one of the weirdest ancient tombs ever found in Greece though. In 2009, archaeologists were excavating a 16th century plague burial site in Lazaretto Nuevo Island near Venice. They found a woman's skeleton with a brick jammed into her mouth. Turns out this was part of a very specific ritual. At the time, people believed that some corpses, especially of plague victims, could rise from the dead and spread disease even after being buried. These weren't seen as vampires in the modern sense, but something closer to shroud eaters, corpses that supposedly chewed through their burial shrouds and kept spreading the plague from beyond the grave. The brick in the mouth trick was believed to stop this from happening. Belief was that by jamming something solid into the corpse's mouth, you of course blocked them from eating their shroud. In 1952, a peat cutter working in a bog near the Danish village of Grauballe hit something soft. Turned out it was a man's body. So well preserved that people thought it might be a recent victim, but it wasn't. The body was actually over 2,000 years old. It became known as the Grauballe Man, one of the best preserved bog bodies ever found. He still had his skin, fingernails, and even had stubble on his chin. His throat had been cut ear to ear, deep enough to kill instantly. There were no other injuries. This was likely a sacrifice. Bogs in Iron Age Europe were seen as sacred places, and a lot of bodies found in them show signs of ritual killings. Grauballe Man was probably one of those. You'd still see him today, his face twisted from the moment he died, looking more like a wax figure than an ancient corpse. It's pretty eerie. In 1983, construction workers digging near the town of Talheim, Germany came across a mass grave filled with people. All of them had clearly died violently. Archaeologists found 34 human skeletons, all dating back to around 5000 BCE, during the Neolithic period, long before cities, writing, or formal armies existed. Most of these people had been killed by blunt force trauma to the head, probably from stone axes or clubs. They were men, women, and children, and archaeologists believed that this was a targeted attack, possibly by a rival tribe. Could have been a fight over food or land, an early turf war as farming started becoming a thing and people were competing over limited resources. It's one of the earliest known examples of mass violence in Europe, showing that warfare has been part of our history since the dawn of time. I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.